And so we graduated college, and we were going to rent. We were in Virginia Beach, Virginia. We're like literally minutes from the ocean. We're thinking, why would we leave? We're going to stay here. We're going to rent a place on the water. And his dad said, no, don't be stupid. You're going to buy a property that's going to make you money. And so he helped us buy that first property. He never gave us any money. He didn't give us the fish. In other words, he taught us how to fish. So we bought this property. It was a 4-bedroom rancher, and we rented out the other 2 bedrooms to 2 other guys whose rents pretty much covered our monthly outlay, other than about $50 each. We're got our first job, we're making money, and we have a monthly outlay of $50 a month, and we're homeowners. So, in any case, I remember his dad telling us, if you do what we tell you to do, in Sock's mom, you won't have to work for anyone else when you're 35 years old.
Welcome to the Logger and Listings podcast, where real estate investors, experts, and entrepreneurs come together to share their stories and insights. Hosted by Kurt Warner, an entrepreneur and investor specializing in commercial and residential income properties. This podcast is the perfect mix of honest, insightful, and sometimes funny discussions on the world of real estate investing and entrepreneurship. So grab a drink, sit back, and get ready to learn from the pros on Logger and Listings. Welcome to another episode of the Logger and Listing podcast. I am your host, Kurt Warner. This week, I have the pleasure of having Gary Wilson with us. I actually had the honor of being on Gary's show, and we had a great conversation. And because of that, and because of what Gary has done in the world of real estate investing, I asked him if he'd like to be a guest on the Logger and Listing podcast, and I'm very grateful that he said yes. And Gary has a list of achievements, and I'll just kind of share some of them with you, and I'll allow Gary to go into more about his detail. So at age 40, he retired as corporate vice president, mergers and acquisitions and national banking. In the first 6 months after earning his real estate license, he created a 6-figure income working with investors. He's completed over 100 transactions per year consistently every year without a sales team or assistant, with virtually no marketing costs either, and has traded over 3,000 investment properties in less than 5 years. He's also developed 5 real estate holding companies owning more than 250 rental units. So, Gary, welcome to Logger and Listings.
Thank you, Kurt. I'm so glad to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to share and hopefully help some others,
Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit more about your background outside of all the accomplishments? And again, I only listed about half. And, there's a ton more. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you've accomplished, that would be great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I come from a family of, on my father's side, a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, farmers, merchants. And I was actually born in Germany and came to the States when I was about 4 years old. I don't remember much about Germany, although we're going back there this year with my dad and brother and sister to visit the old where we came from. But in the States, what happened, I guess my really first big lucky break, if you want to call it that, was my first year at university. My roommate was a guy by the name of Socrates. We're still good friends today, and his father was a Greek immigrant. So I always, because of what my father did, I was always around, a very international crowd. I mean, we lived around Washington, D.C. and New York, and especially out in the suburbs and the rural areas. But really, I became interested in investing at an early age. It turns out Socrates' father was a big investor. And so we graduated college, and we were going to rent. We were in Virginia Beach, Virginia. We're like literally minutes from the ocean. We're thinking, why would we leave? We're going to stay here, and we're going to rent a place on the water. And his dad said, no, don't be stupid. You're going to buy a property that's going to make you money. And so he helped us buy that first property. He never gave us any money. He didn't give us the fish. In other words, he taught us how to fish. So we bought this property. It was a 4-bedroom rancher, and we rented out the other 2 bedrooms to 2 other guys whose rents pretty much covered our monthly outlay, other than about $50 each. We're got our first job, we're making money, and we have a monthly outlay of $50 a month, and we're homeowners. So, in any case, I remember his dad telling us, if you do what we tell you to do, in Sock's mom, you won't have to work for anyone else when you're 35 years old. We're We didn't listen. We're young kids, 22, 23 years old. We bought a boat. We bought a VW minivan to pull the boat and did all this stuff that his dad just, he kept saying, you guys are being stupid. You know? So in any case, fast forward, when I was 35 in the corporate world in banking, I realized I was not born to be sitting behind a desk in a corporate office. And I'm going to do it what Sock's dad taught us to do, and I'm going to invest. And I started investing pretty heavily in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was with PNC Bank at the time. And that's when I started becoming more familiar with Canada. And in any case, in 5 years' time, I had enough properties that I was able to retire when I was 40 and built a brokerage company on top of the investment. So this is really important concept here. I actually used the investing, the real estate, as a foundation upon which I could launch other businesses. So I launched a title business, of course, a brokerage, a property management business, an appraisal business. So we had a nice little conglomerate going there. And the really, cool thing was I didn't have to keep remarketing to get new clients because the same clients were using all those services. Okay. Um, Now I'll fast forward again, did that for many years, and eventually met uh, uh, my wife, who's up in London, Ontario. So we lived in a place. Many listeners probably know where the Danforth is.
Hmm.
Sort of northeast Toronto, and it's a great little Greek town that merges into an Asian town. And so I'm a big foodie, and I love food from all over the world. So we lived there. I got to become familiar with the marketplace there in real estate, and saw a lot of people were doing a bigger version of what I call house hacking. They would take a 3-story, 100-year-old house that had maybe 3 or 4 rooms per floor, maintain obviously a general living area, living room, dining room, kitchen on the main floor, but all the other rooms they would rent out individually to cover the cost, because that threeplex probably costs $900,000, right? And we're in the States, you might be able to get it for like 150,000 for, so a big difference. But the cash flow it's all relative, right? So in any case, we ended up moving out to London and rode the wave there for a bit. Land prices pretty much doubled in the time frame that I was there, and home prices, same thing. The GO train is now, I believe, still to be developed, going all the way out to London, and that'll change London permanently. I mean, it's a great area, guys. If you've never been there, wonderful place. You're 45 minutes from the lakes. So, any case, I'm sorry, I'll get off. I'm going on a rabbit hole there. But the thing is, I want to emphasize is, I've known a lot of my colleagues who are Canadian will invest in Canada and invest in the U.S. And the laws are very similar. There are some differences, but at the end of the day, everything is relative. And if you think about it, appreciation is a big part of any good strategy investing in real estate. And it just so happens the property in Canada over time has appreciated more than that in most of the United States. And let's face it, Canada, we have the number one, we're number one in living standard as far as all of the industrialized nations go. That's hard to beat. So that's why so many people love to come there from foreign countries, because it's such a wonderful place to live. It's peaceful, quiet. There's not as much crime. It's great economy, easy to get jobs. Everybody's, for the most part, has higher degrees, and it's just wonderful people, beautiful place, so lots of investing opportunities. So that's sort of where I'll leave off there, just to let people noodle on that for a moment.
Well, definitely an interesting background. And obviously being, in the US for years, starting your investing journey there, and then coming to Canada, kind of continuing that, you've seen both markets. And you did express some differences with there. But for Canadians that, are investing right now up here, or want to invest in the US, what are some of the, some of the things they should look out for when they're trying to cross-border invest?
Sure. Well, if you are going to cross and invest into the U.S., unless things change, you're going to pay a 10%, basically a tax or a fee, if you call it that, when you take your money back across the border. It's there's something that's part of being a Canadian. the end of the day, you get what you pay for. And let's face it, in Canada, we have medical care completely
Mm,
paid for, other than crutches and medicine, things like that. Um, and again, everything's relative. But in the States, I will tell you there are certain states that are more business friendly. They're more the laws and the courts, or would lean more towards the owner and the ownership rights. And other states would lean more towards the tenant with more stronger tenant rights. Those states would be California, Washington State, New York, New Jersey, Maryland.
mm,
There's just some examples there. Whereas the states that are more owner friendly would be Florida, Texas, Tennessee. Believe it or not, Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Pennsylvania is more a tenant leaning. Western Pennsylvania is more owner leaning. Um, most of the states, the laws are generally more owner friendly than what you would find in Canada. There are provinces and cities in Canada that are very owner friendly.
mm,
Saskatchewan, for example, around Toronto. Of course, the Toronto itself, the city of Toronto, actually has its own set of real estate laws inside the province. Of course, the province is inside the federal government, and there's a pecking order there. But well, just an example, um, in Toronto, generally speaking, if you have a tenant that's not paying the rent in the wintertime, you can, and you have to go to court, you can win the case, but you can't really get possession. You can't force that tenant out during the winter months. Most judges will allow that. And more importantly, you may be required to pay heat for that unit for the tenant while they're there. But on the other hand, generally speaking, there are far fewer of those problems in Canada, specifically Ontario and then Toronto. So as long as you do your due diligence, right, and you do a thorough job of screening and interviewing, you really shouldn't have those problems anyways.
mm,
Um, so, but generally speaking, in the United States, you would, once you were granted, um, you win a case against a tenant, for example, for not paying the rent, you can get possession within 30 days, generally speaking, in most states. The only exception would be during the pandemic, there was, of course, a moratorium on evictions, and you just couldn't, as long as someone could make the claim that the pandemic had caused them to lose a job or what have you, or they're sick, then yeah, you have to follow the rules, and you have to let them stay there. But generally speaking, it's easier in the States on average to have stronger ownership laws in your favor than in Canada. But again, it's a trade-off. There are parts of the U.S., some states and some counties and cities that really do not appreciate that much. And we just spoke about Toronto and Ontario. It's the same out in Vancouver, BC. It's can get quite expensive out there. So to me, I would, now that I've been investing for several years, Kurt, um, in the beginning, I would focus more on cash flow, and cash flow is still important. But now I put a little more emphasis on capital appreciation. I still cash flow, but I, I'm utilizing the increased value more than I did in the past, and more than I did the cash flow in the past. And most investors will do that. Their philosophy will evolve to put more emphasis on capital appreciation as time goes on. Because let's face it, let's say you spend $1 million on a downtown condo. In 10 years, it may be worth $2 million. Well, that's a lot of wealth that you can leverage, borrow against to buy other properties. Let's say you took the same property in the States, you might spend 200,000 on it, and maybe it went to 400,000 in 10 years. The same doubling effect, but you've only got 200,000 additional equity versus $1 million additional equity. I'll take the $1 million.
No, let's share that. Let's share the million together.
Exactly.
So, so when you're looking at markets, like you talk about the importance of cash flow, obviously, and early on in your career, you did build up a portfolio of cash flowing assets. Now, when you're looking at also getting, some appreciation, what are some factors that you look at in a market to say, okay, this market, not only can I find properties that cash flow, but it is one that I foresee in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, also maybe doubling in asset value.
Yeah, great question. And I'll start off by really talking about cash flow first, since that was my intention was to focus on cash flow in the early years. So, for example, I love places like, Hamilton, wherever you have a higher education, you have a university, wherever you have a good hospital system, and wherever you have some other industry sector that's well represented, like high tech or finance. It could also be military. If you have a military base close by, generally you have a solid rental community, and you can get great rents from those areas. So again, that's just a higher education, strong medical presence, something like high tech or finance, because those are relatively recession-proof business sectors. The, the economy could go up or down, but those sectors are generally pretty stable. That's really for cash flow. Now, for appreciation, I'm looking for growth, and that's why I'm sure the cat's already out of the bag. You know, if London looks like a wonderful appreciation opportunity, particularly if the GO train does go out there. They already have an airport.
Hmm.
Not many people use it because they can drive to Detroit in a little over an hour and get a flight from Detroit and save a lot of money. I do that too. But let's say the GO train goes out there and the population continues to blossom, which it has been. The values will keep going up. Wherever you have increased demand, it automatically drives up value. It's the old supply demand seesaw, if you will. And for me personally, this is my own opinion. I believe the seesaw is leaning towards demand for housing out in London for the foreseeable future. If the GO train does go, boy, it's Katie bar the door, because you end up with prices just like you have in Mississauga and spreading out further to the west, Kitchener and Brampton, things like that. Um, but for now, there's other areas, guys. London isn't the only area. I mean, go north of Toronto, go up through Barrie, even beyond that. Go up to the northeast along the lake, Kingston and on up through there. There's lots of areas of growth, and I think it's going to continue that way because Toronto is very attractive to a lot of people around the world. And if you see it, if you live there, you know it's a very diverse area, ethnically diverse people from all over the world, and it's a great place to be. Why wouldn't people want to move there? So as long as that trend continues, I think you're going to see a lot of increased size. Will we have some mild recessions? Yes, we're kind of sort of in one now, but nothing really to write. In 2015, there was a mild 6-month recession in Ontario, but almost non-detectable. The
Hmm.
reason why Canada is very, very appealing also to a lot of people, guys, is this. In the United States, it's one of the few countries that actually has a secondary market for their mortgages. Mortgages get pulled together, sold to Wall Street, and Wall Street creates a fund, a mutual fund out of them, because they're all uh, quasi-government backed loan instruments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and so forth. So what happens is that it frees up that capital to be lent out again. So, or fractional lending, any one deposit of say $1 million can be lent out as many as 10 times through this process. When in Canada, we don't do that. It's a portfolio country. The banks that make the loans hold those loans in house and service them. They're not sold to a secondary market. So what that means is the lender has to do far more strict and accurate and thorough due diligence on the borrowers, and the terms for the borrowers are such that it'd be very difficult for them to walk away from that, from a property. So you just don't have as much of that up there. But to me, that's a good thing long term.
Hmm.
It creates stability, which I really like. And when you're investing, stability is a big thing. So in any case, I kind of got off on a tangent there, but the um, the original point was for appreciation, look for areas of growth, and you can determine that by looking at the zoning plans. Go to your county office building. Look
Hmm.
at the zoning plans going out for the next decade, and look and see where the government money's coming in the form of grants, for example, and that'll tell you where they intend to have more growth. So it's more of a scientific approach than just looking at values going up. There's a reason for that, and my suggestion is do the research, get the information. I mean, Stats Canada, the census for Canada, is an incredible tool. I mean, I really encourage you to research that. You can create custom reporting on it, find out everything you want about people and property, and they'll have right there. They'll tell you what areas are growing, and it's actual data. It's done every 5 years. It's updated in the interim, and you just can't go wrong with having those facts and that data.
No, I think definitely from a data standpoint, as you mentioned, it's important for all investors to kind of look at that, look at the numbers, figure out their market. And I do like the point of saying looking at markets that are growing. Now, one point that I wanted to go back to, just because the Canadian audience is probably not familiar with the secondary mortgage market.
Yeah.
So in the US, how does that work? And how could investors, let's say in Canada, look at entering that space? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of like the discount notes and mortgages market, correct?
Sure. Yeah. So those commodities you can actually invest in through any investment firm. Um, uh, TD Bank is all over the U.S. now. So when they have
Mm.
TD Ameritrade, TD, um, you can participate through that. And now we'll tell you, I know um, when I first moved to Canada, I thought, well, this is great. I've got a bank that's in both countries. I can move money back and forth, and but it doesn't work that way because it's two different countries with two different sets of laws. So each in the United States, TD is a separate entity than TD Canada. Is it the same ownership? Absolutely, but the systems, the processes are absolutely completely different. So just
Mm.
be aware. Just because some of you like me are, we're crossing the border on a weekly basis, and we know when to use credit cards here and debit cards there, depending on what country we're in, and we look at the exchange rate. When it comes to actual banking, there's only one bank that truly lets you kind of cross over. That's actually U.S. Bank, believe it or not.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, but in any case, when it comes to investing, you can Google, like, go to Fidelity Investments, fidelity.com, and you can research mutual funds that have these mortgage-backed securities in there. So you can indirectly participate in that market. Now, when it comes to the real estate, here's something that's really interesting. A lot of people assume that you can no longer assume mortgages in the United States, and that's actually not entirely true. Any mortgages that's underwritten using USDA, um, FDA, I'm sorry, sorry, getting my P's and Q's mixed up there. VA and FHA.
Hmm.
Those mortgages are assumable. You have to qualify to assume those mortgages. In the old days, you could assume a mortgage without qualifying, but you can still assume them today with qualification. Now, here's why this is important. Um, in Canada, we've enjoyed very low interest rates for quite a long time.
Hmm.
In the U.S., we did for a few short years, and now they're up to 6 and 7%. So let's say you're going out to buy a property this summer, and you're looking at interest rates of 7%, and yet you find a property that was purchased, say, 5 years ago, and it has a 3% mortgage. If it is, FHA, VA, or USDA, I can make the case for you to assume that mortgage because you get a much lower interest rate. The loan has already been amortized to a degree, right?
Hmm.
And the difference between the amount of the mortgage, the principal balance, and the purchase price, you have to bring that money to the table.
Yep.
So you can participate that way too, and you can purchase and invest in the United States just like you can in Canada. You don't have to be a citizen or a resident. In fact, if you ever did want to get dual citizenship, you could. The fact that you own property in the States actually would help your cause. I know it's difficult going. Believe me, I've done it. It's extremely difficult for regular citizens to get residency in each other's country, and even more difficult to get citizenship in both countries. It's just not the same as if you're a immigrant seeking asylum. In both countries, you come right in, right?
Hmm.
But if you're a regular citizen, and there's no distress, it could literally take you up to 7 years, guys, both directions. I've been
Wow.
through it. And it's really not necessary. I started the process, and in a few years, I thought, why am I doing this? It really isn't necessary. I mean, some of the border guards actually recognize me. It's costing that, and as long as I wasn't on OHIP, so I didn't cause any stress there for the province, and I actually brought money to the province and spent money in the province, and for the most part, all of my income was generated, and all of it, in fact, in the beginning, all of it in the United States.
Mhm.
So it was I didn't have any problem. I was never there for a duration of 180 days, contiguous.
Yep.
I was never anywhere more than 100 days contiguous, so I wasn't in violation of that rule. Um, and I had family up there. I was married at the time, and lots of friends. So it was easy to participate in projects without having to be the principal of a project. I could be a passive investor, and um, but that's exactly what I did.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, what else are you up to these days? Because, I talked about global investor agent. Can
Mhm.
you tell us a little bit more about that, how that started, and what services kind of you provide for investors and agents?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking us. So, perfect timing too, because we're actually I've taught probably I'd say 1,000 agents in Ontario, in Quebec, and British Columbia how to work with investors. And what's really cool about this is um, a lot of the marketing works the same in both countries. There's certain things you have to know about. And so because I lived there, I was, thankfully I was, had the resources to study everything. So I knew what to change in the training curriculum. For example, you're not supposed to door knock and cold call and things like that in Canada, in almost any province. Your marketing has to be true and direct. You can't uh, advertise something and then when someone responds, actually show them something else. You can't do that bait and switch type thing. It's frowned upon it everywhere, actually, but in Canada, there's actually laws against that. But ultimately, what happens is the letters we use, the social media, is all the same. We form community groups of investors. We can do caravans and bus tours of investment properties. We can pull resources together, and a group of us buy a property together. It's almost all the same. What really is different though is this, guys. The research is different. See, the U.S. follows uh, Freedom of Information Act laws that
Mhm.
make a lot of information available to the public. If it's considered part of the public domain, then the counties and the state authorities have to provide access to the public, like for court records and property records, because see, property taxes are used for the common good. So it's
Mhm.
deemed that that's public information. What are the property taxes on these properties? We can, within 3 seconds, find that out. Um, but more importantly, in Canada, the privacy laws for people information are far more strict. So you can't just go into a courthouse or call up an attorney and say, hey, can you tell me in all the divorce cases going on right now and where they all are? I mean, you can try it, but it's not really you're not behaving according to the law. Um, so when we're researching Canada, there is a national investors group called RAIN, REIN, Real Estate Investors Network. Probably everybody's heard of them. They have some really awesome tools, guys. Um, you can also use other data resources like GIS, GIS data. There's another source up in Quebec province that we use. Um, but gathering data is a little more difficult in Canada. There are paid services. I don't know how they get their data. I don't ask. I also don't use them, by the way. I've looked into them, but I figure there's something that if it doesn't look right and seem right, I would just rather not deal with it. Um, Now, on the other hand, belonging to networks and associations and community groups, those avail you to a lot of information. It's basically word of mouth and person to person, but at least you're doing it ethically and legally and honorably,
Mhm.
you can find information. But the reason I'm putting so much emphasis on this, Kurt, is, you know, data and information is absolutely vital. On our team, we call it the Global Investor Agent Team. One of our mantras is we lead with education, then we get the right education, then we get the right information, then we take right action and we get right results. So I know it sounds conservative, but I would rather I would rather take the high percentage shot than guess. When you make a mistake in the business world, it can be very painful. So we do a lot of research. We take the high percentage shot, and as a result, I've never had a losing property ever. I've had properties that gave me a lot of gray hair, but we've never lost money on a property, thank goodness. So back to the team, we provide all the tools and resources. We do have a presence in Ontario, just outside of Toronto. There's a team that the guy that runs the team, I'll just mention his name, Robert Paperny. He and I are colleagues. We both are what's called an Icon Award winner and also a Triple Diamond Award winner, which is extremely rare. We both have it. We both happen to be in the same mastermind group. And he's a really good guy. He's extremely smart, very hardworking. And that we're taking a part of that to develop a global investor agent team in Ontario. And we already have the first couple agents getting started. So keep an eye out for that. You'll see us at the investor groups. You'll see me there personally and also online. Anybody that's interested is certainly welcome. Just go to globalinvestoragent.com, click on learn more, and I'll have a conversation with you. There's nothing to sell. There's no recruiting. It's simply, looking for the match and seeing if your ambitions are aligned with what we do. And just so you know, obviously we focus on investing. We don't make any excuses. It's just, we love owner occupants, but for us, we like the thrill of the game of investing. And if you got that entrepreneurial gene, we'd love to meet you,
So is this only for existing agents, or could it be for somebody that's like, hey, I want to get my license as an agent and want to focus on investors? Could somebody like that also benefit from reaching out?
Absolutely, yeah. We generally start them off with what's called a 90-day fast start program. So it's a regimented, structured, organized learning platform that gives them the fundamentals, the basics, like 1, 2, 3, ABC, so that when they hit out there to the marketplace, they're able to speak the language of investing. They'll have the terminology and the methodology that investors need. And sadly, most agents don't have that. Their brokers are not training them how to invest, let alone work with investors. So by default, they're using traditional methodology that they would use with owner occupants with the investor. Of course, that frustrates the investor and the agent's frustrated. So we actually solve that conundrum. But again, you would definitely want to have some interest in investing. And in fact, a lot of our agents, Kurt, start off like me investing and realize, hey, I should just get my license. And we see a lot of that, and we're happy to do it because we're investors too, So, yeah,
Absolutely. No, I know a few investors, in Canada, in different parts that, started, built up their portfolio, and, some were in a position where they were able to leave their 9 to 5. And, they realized, just like you did, that there's a lot of agents out there that don't know how to work with investors, don't understand the terminology, don't understand how to structure the right type of offer that investors want. So they then got licensed as agents to obviously help themselves, but also help, fellow investors. So that is awesome. So what other points of contact, like if somebody wants to reach out to you directly or to find out other things that you're doing, what are some of the best ways they can get a hold of you?
well, really, social media. I'm on Facebook, and I will full disclosure here. I do get on Facebook for personal reasons, but for the business part of it, we have a whole team. We have 6 employees they're non-licensed, they're not agents. They work for us. They work for the team, and so we're all over. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. So you could go anywhere out there and look for real estate with Gary Wilson, or look
Yeah.
at the Gary Wilson, or ampersand Gary Wilson, and you'll find me. But the YouTube channel has hundreds and hundreds of videos, guys. Doesn't cost a dime. Just go pick a subject. It's real estate with Gary Wilson YouTube channel. There's different playlists for different subjects. So if you're interested in rentals, click on the playlist for rentals, and all the podcasts are out there, all the podcast recordings. But I want to emphasize something here, guys. We've all heard of Robert Kiyosaki. I was blessed enough to be able to spend a day with him back in 2015 in Lake Tahoe, have dinner and the whole 9 yards. And I told him, I said, I feel like I'm doing well, but I don't know if I'm really following the model. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I built up a portfolio of properties. Then I started these other businesses. And he said, no, you're doing it perfectly. You're on the right half of the quadrant. He said,
Mhm.
think about it. When you work with investors, do you get more or fewer transactions than you do with owner occupants? I said, well, clearly, by the way, the ratio, guys, for the listeners, you, this is not just my statistic, but everybody I've ever met that does this, you'll average 4 transactions with investors for every one that you get with an owner occupant. That to me is pretty good math, you know?
That is very good.
Yeah. But you can also, I'll tell you what, if you want to email me, it's Gary, Gary, at rewgw.com. You could do that or go to the globalinvestoragent.com website and just click on learn more and essentially get the same result. But um, definitely look, if you're an agent, boy, I tell you what, now is a really good time to be doing this. The investor business is picking up, the owner occupant business is slowing a little bit. And we've got clients in 13 different countries and growing, you know. So they're looking specifically at US and Canada.
No, that is awesome, and we will make sure that the descriptions and everything, all the links are in the description below. So for you guys that might have missed that, just look down below; they will be there. And it's very interesting that you mentioned Robert Kiyosaki, because when you were in the very beginning talking about you and Socrates and his dad and everything, immediately my mind went to, this sounds like Rich Dad Poor Dad.
I know.
Getting the guidance from somebody that has already been, walked through the path, which is awesome. And I also had the pleasure of meeting him once several years ago when he was doing a book tour in Canada. And for anybody that's not read Rich Dad Poor Dad, if you're an investor entrepreneur, you're definitely missing out. It'll probably lead you down what people call the Purple Library journey, where you also read other books like Cash Flow Quadrant that he's
Yeah.
written, that Gary you're referring to, with the left side, right side, which is very important for anybody that wants to take this business seriously.
Yeah. I think I've got 27 Robert Kiyosaki books from him and some of his colleagues. They would write the book and he would endorse it. And the very first training program we ever had, I still got that. And I tell you what, guys, you would think I would know a lot about money because of my banking days. I only learned money from a banker's perspective. When I really started investing and studying how money really works, that was a critical watershed moment, watermark moment in my life. And I hope everybody experiences the same thing. Really learn and study, guys. I mean, if it's with me or anybody, I mean, talk to Kurt. I mean, your host here, Kurt Warner, is an amazing resource for you if you're in U.S. or Canada, particularly if you're in Ontario. I mean, he's in Ontario. I mean, you can't get
Yep.
your chances are you can meet in an investor event, but build and leverage those relationships and network. My gosh, it's worth as much as any education I can ever give you. You know.
No, absolutely. And I want to ask you two final questions, Gary. The first one is, where do you see your business, Global Investor Agent, going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I'll tell you what, we're continuing to grow and expand. I mean, it's the growth curve is increasing, which is very interesting because most real estate professionals or businesses starting to wind down a bit and people are leaving the business. Our productivity actually went up in December. I've never seen that happen before, you know. Um, but I do see us going more global. That's hence the name Global Investor Agent Team. And I also see us doing a lot more in the crypto world. And I'm not here to advocate or promote cryptocurrency, but I'm just telling you, if you really study what the blockchain is and what it means, you study, Web 3.0 and the metaverse, and you understand the fundamental, just choose Bitcoin. Pretty much the writing is on the wall. I mean, this is my personal opinion. I
Mhm.
believe we're at the beginning of another age that's on the same level of magnitude as the industrial age. That's how big I think this
Wow.
is. Yep. So every pet store, every restaurant, every garage is going to be using blockchain. The first one you're going to see, real estate's already using that, by the way. EXP uses blockchain processing through something called enriched data. Um, but look at the title business. It's the perfect match for blockchain processing. Researching title, a chain of title is exactly what happens on the blockchain. So I would just study it, jump in early at a level you're comfortable with. For me, it's the real estate sector. I mean, you can now go to property.com and get fractional ownership of properties using real estate agents, by the way, right? With crypto. And that's just one example. So it's here to stay. I mean, I think we're all lucky that we in the time that we are.
Mhm.
Is it scary? To some people it is, but you don't have to be scared. Mitigate fear through education and then make your own decisions from there.
No, I absolutely agree with that. The education piece is critical for anybody that is learning something new, and that's something I have not looked into in blockchain in investing. And I think what you just mentioned there, like fractional ownership, could allow somebody that maybe is younger, hasn't saved up money yet, doesn't have access to capital, to actually maybe get a small piece of a deal to actually get their kind of foot in the door as an investor and kind of build from there versus maybe putting it into a bank where, they're not earning the same return as you can, obviously investing in real estate.
Yeah, perfectly said. I hope a lot of people are jumping up and down and thinking, I knew it, I knew it. I just need somebody like Kurt and Gary to say it publicly. And I'm not afraid anymore. I know 50% of the population thinks we're crazy, but the other 50%, guys, we're actually making money already. And I mean, on a magnitude that's far greater than what I did when I first started out. And it's just faster. The velocity is higher. It just, but again, get the education first. That's absolutely paramount.
The one piece of advice I'd like to give the audience is, what Gary is saying. You said 50% of the people are going to be scared. The other 50% are maybe, curious, interested, or already involved. And try to get in that 50% that is either involved or curious. I remember when the first time I heard about Bitcoin, I was at an event and some young kid come up and talked to me about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. And I'm like, what's he talking about? He knows nothing. And my ego got in the way of, making a lot of money instead of actually listening and going out and doing my own research to understand it more. I didn't get involved in Bitcoin years later. I think when it was around 14,000 ish or so.
Yeah.
But imagine if I would have listened to that kid when Bitcoin was like a couple $100. So again, if you're on the curious side, make sure you start researching this stuff. Blockchain, crypto, NFTs, AI are things that are all here to stay. And I think it's important to understand how to leverage them for your business and to grow your wealth as well.
Absolutely.
And the last question I have for you, Gary, if you were to go back to the beginning of your career, back to young Gary in your 20s, when you and Socrates were starting out, based on everything you've learned in the past, I'm going to say 10 years because you're only 32.
Yeah.
What advice would you give yourself at age 22?
Oh boy. It's a double-edged sword because when you're that age, you want to have fun, especially if you're near the water anywhere. But I'm telling you guys, I wish I'd have started much earlier. And I got that first property, and then 2 years later, I bought my own home. But it was 10 years before I bought another investment property. That's 10 years I could have accumulated far more wealth. And who knows where I'd be today? Because the compounding effect is like magic. It literally is the eighth wonder of the world. And it works in real estate just like it works in the stock market and the crypto market. Start early, do not let up on the gas. Be smart. Remember, education plus information plus action equals results. Make sure they're all right. Okay, right education, right information, right action, right results. But start now. And if you're not 22 and you're 52 or 62 or 72, my oldest student is 84 years old, and he's still cruising right along. There's no, the only thing that will be a shame is if you put it off another day. Start today. Whatever age you're at, start today. But again, from I was speaking to myself as a 32-year-old to the 22-year-old, I would have said, you need to keep buying properties. And man, I'm telling you, the magnitude of growth is literally, it's exponential. Like you can't even, you need a compounding calculator to show you, actually do that. Google on your phone, compounding calculator, and put in a few examples and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
That is awesome. That is awesome. That's great advice, not only to young Gary, but to our audience, especially those that are younger. However, if you are on the other side of 40 or the other side of 50 or 60, it isn't too late. There's a lot of more years left to invest, to learn. And I think the speed at which things are growing and, advancing right now, it's the opportunity. So Gary, I would like to thank you again for joining me on Logger and Listings. Hopefully our listeners go back and listen to this again, because I think there are a lot of golden nuggets for people to take away, implement in their own lives and their own businesses. And again, to all the listeners, to get a hold of Gary, just look at the description below. Several links will be there. He also provided his email address. Make sure you take advantage of the opportunity that he's given you to reach out to him, to learn more and to grow alongside him. So on behalf of Logger and Listings, thank you everybody, and cheers. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Logger and Listings podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to leave a like, comment, or even better yet, share it with other aspiring investors and entrepreneurs. Your support helps this podcast grow organically, and in turn helps other investors and entrepreneurs grow their businesses and have fun along the way. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.